There's a secret Kathryn Kuhlman kept for decades, a ritual so powerful she only shared it with her closest confidants. And today, you'll uncover exactly what happens when we light a candle at 11:11 p.m. But before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt like God was trying to speak to you, but somehow you couldn't hear, like there was interference between you and heaven? Kathryn knew this feeling. She understood there's a specific time when the veil between the natural and supernatural thins, a moment when our prayers don't just ascend, they echo. It was March of 1967. Kathryn was in her Pittsburgh hotel room, preparing for another miracle crusade. But that night, something felt different. She'd received a letter from a desperate woman, a mother pleading for a miracle for her son, given up, for lost by doctors. Kathryn looked at the clock. 11:09 p.m. She did something she'd never done before. She lit a white candle, placed the letter beside it, and waited. At 11:11 sharp, she began to pray. Not an ordinary prayer. A prayer that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. 3 days later, she received a phone call. The boy was completely healed. Exactly at the hour she'd lit that candle. Coincidence? Kathryn didn't believe in coincidences. You need to understand something about numbers in the Bible. They aren't there by chance. The number 11 represents transition, change, revelation. When you see 11:11, you're seeing a portal, a moment when natural time aligns with God's time. But why a candle? Light was always God's first creative act. Let there be light, and there was light. When you light a candle at 11:11, you're declaring that God's light can pierce any darkness in your life. You're creating a meeting point between your faith and the divine presence. Kathryn discovered this wasn't just a ritual. It was a key. In the following months, she began teaching this practice to select individuals, always in secret, always with the same instruction. Light the candle exactly at 11:11. Keep your heart open, and watch how God responds. The results were impossible to ignore. Sarah, a 60-year-old widow, had lost her home to debt. On the first night she lit the candle, she received an unexpected call, an inheritance she didn't even know existed, exactly the amount she needed to reclaim everything. Michael, a businessman on the brink of bankruptcy, lit his candle on a Monday. By Wednesday, he'd received the business partnership offer that would change his life forever. Linda, who had been trying to conceive for 8 years, lit her candle for 7 consecutive nights. On the 8th day, she discovered she was expecting twins. But I know what you're thinking. This sounds like superstition. Where is God in all of this? Let me explain something Kathryn understood profoundly. God doesn't need the candle. God doesn't need the time, but we do. We need something concrete, something tangible, to help us focus our faith at a specific moment. The candle has no magic power. The power is in your focused faith. The power is in the moment you stop everything you're doing and declare, God, this is my moment with you. Kathryn used to say, prayer without faith is mere talk, but faith without action is mere fantasy. The 11:11 candle is the bridge between your prayer and your expectation. But there's more. Something Kathryn discovered that few know. The 11:11 time doesn't just function as a prayer time. It functions as a spiritual reset, a moment where you can literally rewrite the script of your life. Think of it this way. You live surrounded by negative thoughts, worries, fears. These thoughts create a frequency, a vibration that attracts more of the same. But when you stop at 11:11, light your candle and lift your mind to God, you change your frequency. You move from the frequency of fear to the frequency of faith. Kathryn observed this hundreds of times. People who practiced the 11:11 candle ritual began experiencing extraordinary synchronicities, unexpected encounters, opportunities that seemed to appear out of nowhere, doors opening when it seemed they were all closed. Why? Because they had aligned their spiritual frequency with the frequency of divine providence. But let me tell you about the most impressive case Kathryn ever witnessed. It was 1969. A young pastor named David was about to give up on his ministry. His church was empty, his finances destroyed, his marriage on the rocks. He'd lost faith not only in his calling but in God himself. Kathryn met him after one of her services. She saw something in him, a dimmed light, but not a dead one. You're going to do something for me, she said. For 30 days you're going to light a candle at 11:11 p.m. but you're not going to ask God for anything. You're only going to thank him for something that hasn't happened yet, but that you know will happen. David thought she'd lost her mind, but he was desperate enough to try anything. On the first night, he lit the candle and whispered, "Thank you, God, for the restoration that is coming." He didn't even believe what he was saying. On the fifth night, his wife approached him as he lit the candle. "What are you doing?" she asked. He explained. To his surprise, she asked to join him. On the 10th night, they received an unexpected visit. An elderly couple who had just moved to town. They wanted to visit the church. On the 15th night, that couple brought 3 more families. On the 20th night, David had to open the overflow room to accommodate everyone. On the 30th day, his church was overflowing. But the biggest miracle wasn't the church's growth. It was the restoration of his marriage. It was the return of his faith. It was the discovery that God had never left him. Kathryn knew there was something supernatural happening when people committed to this sacred ritual, but she also discovered something disturbing. Not everyone could maintain the discipline. Most people tried for 2-3 nights and then gave up. They wanted the miracle, but they didn't want the responsibility of consistent faith. Heaven responds to consistency, not convenience, Kathryn used to say. She realized that those who practiced the 11-11 candle for at least 7 consecutive nights experienced a change not only in their circumstances, but in their spiritual nature. They became different people, more sensitive to God's voice, more capable of discerning his direction. But there was a secret within the secret, something Kathryn only shared with those who had already proven their spiritual seriousness. The candle wasn't just for asking, it was for listening. At 11:11 p.m., when you light your candle, you're not just creating a moment of prayer. You're creating a moment of revelation, a moment where God can speak to you in ways he can't during the noise of the day. Kathryn kept a journal of everything God showed her during these sacred moments. Visions about people she should pray for, revelations about healings that were about to happen, specific directions about her miracle crusades. Her journal was filled with phrases like, "God showed me a woman with gray hair in the 3rd row. She will be healed of arthritis tomorrow." And the next day, the healing happened exactly as revealed. Do you want to know why miracles were so frequent at Kathryn's services? Because she spent hours in the wee hours of the morning with her candle lit, receiving direct instructions from heaven about what was going to happen. The 11:11 candle had become her direct line to God. But there's something you need to understand before you begin this practice, something Kathryn always warned about. This is not a spiritual game. It's not an experience you do out of curiosity. When you light a candle at 11:11 and invite God's presence into your life, you're entering sacred territory. You're telling heaven, "I'm ready for change, even if it's different from what I expect." Because sometimes God answers in ways we don't immediately understand. Kathryn told of a woman who lit the candle for 3 weeks, praying for her alcoholic husband to stop drinking. At the end of the 3rd week, she discovered she had the strength to leave him. 2 months later, he sought her out, sober, begging for a second chance. God had answered, just not in the way she expected. Heaven always answers at 11:11, but not always with the answer we ask for. Sometimes with the answer we need. Kathryn learned to trust in God's wisdom, even when his ways seemed mysterious. And it was this trust that transformed her into one of the most spiritually powerful women of her generation. Now, are you ready to know exactly how to do this ritual? Are you prepared to discover the specific steps Kathryn followed? And more importantly, are you willing to commit to at least 7 consecutive nights? Because what I'm about to reveal could completely change the trajectory of your life, but only if you're willing to take it seriously. Heaven is waiting for you at 11:11. The question is, will you show up? Let me tell you exactly how Kathryn did it. Every detail matters. Every step has a spiritual purpose she discovered through years of experience. First, the candle. It can't be just any candle. Kathryn always used white candles, never colored ones. Why? Because white represents purity, total surrender. When you light a white candle, you're declaring that your intention is pure, that you're surrendering completely to God's will. Second, the location. Kathryn always lit her candle in the same place. It didn't matter if she was at home, in hotels, or at friends' houses. She created a personal altar wherever she was. A small table, a white cloth underneath, the candle in the center. Consistency creates connection, she said. God likes to meet us in the same place. Third, the time. exactly 11:11, not 11:10, not 11:12. Kathryn discovered that precision was fundamental. She believed that at 11:11 there was a spiritual window that opened for exactly 7 minutes, from 11:11 to 11:18. Within those 7 minutes, something extraordinary happened in the spiritual world. But what to do during those 7 minutes? Kathryn developed a specific ritual she called the 7 sacred breaths. First minute, breath of gratitude. You give thanks for 3 specific things that happened that day, not generic things, specific things. Thank you for the child's smile I saw on the street. Thank you for the unexpected call from my friend. Thank you for the song that played on the radio and touched my heart. Second minute, breath of surrender. You surrender 3 specific worries to God. God, I surrender into your hands my anxiety about work. I surrender my worry about my health. I surrender my fear about the future. Third minute, breath of faith. You declare 3 things you believe God will do, even without seeing them yet. I believe you are preparing a new door for me. I believe you are restoring my family. I believe you have a greater purpose for my life. Fourth minute, breath of intercession. You pray for 3 specific people, not generic prayers, specific prayers. God, touch John's heart. He is lost and needs you. Heal Mary. She is suffering from this illness. Bless Anna's family. They are going through difficulties. Fifth minute, breath of revelation. You remain in total silence. Just listen. Kathryn said, this was the most important minute. We stop talking and start listening. Sixth minute, breath of commitment. You commit to 3 specific actions for the next day. Tomorrow I will call my mother. Tomorrow I will help that needy person. Tomorrow I will start that project I've been putting off. Seventh minute, breath of expectation. You declare your expectation for the next 24 hours. In the next 24 hours, I expect a sign from you. In the next 24 hours, I believe something supernatural will happen. In the next 24 hours, I will see your hand acting in my life. At 11:18, you extinguish the candle and go to sleep. No television, no cell phone, no conversations. You go straight to sleep, keeping your mind focused on what you've just experienced. Kathryn discovered that those who followed these steps exactly experienced what she called prophetic dreams, dreams that contained directions, revelations, or preparations for what was to come. But she also discovered something that frightened her. Not everyone was prepared for what happened after 7 consecutive nights of practice. She called it the awakening of spiritual sensitivity. People began to notice things they hadn't noticed before. They began to hear God's voice in casual conversations. They began to discern hidden intentions in people around them. They began to feel the presence of angels, and sometimes the presence of demons. When you open a door to the spiritual realm, Kathryn warned, you don't control what comes in. Therefore, your life must be covered by the protection of Jesus. She always guided people to pray a protection prayer before starting the ritual. Jesus, I cover myself with your blood. I declare that only your light may manifest at this moment. All darkness must depart from my sacred altar. But for those who were prepared, the results were revolutionary. Margaret, a 50-year-old nurse, had lost her capacity for compassion towards her patients. She was burned out, exhausted. Considering a career change, she started practicing the 11:11 candle ritual out of curiosity. On the 3rd night, she dreamt of an elderly woman she didn't know. In the dream, the woman said, "Thank you for saving my life." The next day, an elderly woman was admitted to the hospital where Margaret worked. It was exactly the woman from the dream. Margaret felt something different, a deep, almost supernatural compassion. She cared for that patient with a love she hadn't felt in years. 2 days later, the woman's family sought out Margaret. "You saved our mother's life. She said you were the most loving nurse she'd ever known." Margaret understood. God had used the candle ritual to reawaken her calling to care for people. Thomas was a businessman who had built a fortune, but lost his family in the process. His marriage had ended. His children didn't speak to him, and he was alone in an empty mansion. He began practicing the 11:11 candle ritual with a single prayer. God, teach me to love again. On the 7th night, during the 5th minute, the minute of silence, he heard something he'd never heard before, a soft and yet clear voice. Start with your ex-wife. Ask for forgiveness without expecting anything in return. That didn't make sense to him. He had been the one wronged in the divorce. She had taken half of everything. Why should he ask for forgiveness? But the voice had been so real that he couldn't ignore it. The next day, he called his ex-wife. "Sarah, I know this may seem strange, but I need to ask for your forgiveness. I put work above our family. I was an absent husband and a distant father." Sarah was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Thomas, I waited 20 years to hear those words." 3 months later, they were in couples therapy. 6 months later, they renewed their vows. A year later, they had regained the trust of their children. Thomas understood that God had used the 11:11 candle to break his pride and restore his family. But the case that most impressed Kathryn was that of a young woman named Rebecca. Rebecca was only 19 when she began practicing the ritual. She was an orphan, living alone, working 2 jobs to pay for nursing school. Her prayer was simple: "God, I just want a family." In the second week of practice, she began having the same dream repeatedly. She was in a house she didn't recognize, playing with 2 children she didn't know. In the dream, a voice said, "These are your daughters of the heart." Rebecca didn't understand. She didn't even have a boyfriend. In the 3rd week, a co-worker asked for an urgent favor. She needed someone to care for 2 orphaned nieces for a week, while she resolved legal guardianship paperwork. When Rebecca saw the 2 girls, she immediately recognized them. They were exactly the children from her dream. 1 week turned into 2. 2 weeks turned into a month. The co-worker realized that Rebecca had a special gift with children. "Would you like to adopt them?" she asked. "I think you'd be a better mother to them than I am." At 20, Rebecca became the adoptive mother of 2 girls. She had asked God for a family. God had given her exactly that, but in a way she never imagined. Kathryn noticed a pattern in all these cases. God didn't just answer the prayers made during the candle ritual. He answered in ways that revealed his character, his wisdom, and his love. He didn't just give what people asked for. He gave what they really needed. But Kathryn also discovered that the ritual had a power beyond individual prayer. When practiced by a group of people, the results were exponentially greater. She began teaching the practice to small groups of intercessors, groups of 7 people who committed to lighting their candles at the same time, even if they were in different locations. The results were extraordinary. A group of 7 mothers whose children were addicted to drugs began practicing together. In 3 months, 5 of the 7 young people had entered rehab clinics on their own initiative. A group of 7 Christian businessmen who were experiencing financial difficulties began practicing together. In 6 months, all had experienced unexpected turnarounds in their businesses. Kathryn understood that there was something powerful in spiritual agreement. "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them," Jesus had said. But at 11:11, and with candles lit and hearts aligned, God's presence manifested even more intensely. But she also discovered that the ritual had opponents in the spiritual world. People who practiced the 11:11 candle often reported spiritual attacks, strange nightmares, inexplicably falling objects, sensations of a malevolent presence. Kathryn wasn't surprised. When you start to bother the darkness tries to bother you back. She developed specific prayers of protection and spiritual cleansing for those who practiced the ritual. But she also warned, if you're not willing to face spiritual resistance, you're not ready for spiritual power. Most people who faced opposition and persisted discovered that after 2 weeks, the attacks ceased completely. It was as if the spiritual world recognized that they were under divine protection and gave up interfering. But for those who gave up in the face of the first attacks, Kathryn had a harsh word. You wanted heaven, but you weren't willing to face hell. God needs warriors, not spiritual tourists. Kathryn practiced the 11:11 candle until the last day of her life, even when she was sick, even when she was traveling, even when she was exhausted after long crusades. On the night before she died, in 1976, she lit her candle for the last time. A private nurse reported that Kathryn whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for 29 years of sacred encounters. Now I'm going to meet you face to face." She blew out the candle and fell asleep. She never woke up again. But before she left a sealed letter with specific instructions to preserve her spiritual legacy. In this letter she wrote, "The 11:11 candle isn't just a practice. It's a legacy to be passed down through generations. Because there will be times in the history of the church when people will need to connect with God in ways that go beyond conventional methods, moments when traditional faith will not be enough for the challenges to come. And then, she made a prophecy many believe is unfolding today. A time will come when people will feel disconnected from God, even while attending church. A time when prayer will seem powerless. A time when miracles will seem like a thing of the past. In this time, those who know the secret of the 1111 candle will become bridges between heaven and earth. They will become the intercessors who will keep the flame of faith burning in a generation that has forgotten how to speak with God. Perhaps this is the moment Kathryn foretold. Perhaps you've come this far not by chance, but by divine purpose. Perhaps it's time for you to become one of those bridges between heaven and earth. So tonight, at 11:11, light your white candle. Follow the 7 steps Kathryn taught, and watch how God responds. But remember, this isn't an experiment. It's a commitment of at least 7 consecutive nights, a commitment to be ready for your life to change completely, because when you invite God to meet you at 11:11, you're saying, Lord, I am ready to be transformed. I am ready to be used. I am ready to be a bridge between your kingdom and this world. And God always answers invitations like that. Heaven is waiting. Your candle is waiting. 11:11 is approaching. The question isn't if God will answer. The question is, are you ready for the answer? Because sometimes God's answer isn't just giving what we ask for. Sometimes God's answer is transforming us into the person who can receive what He's always wanted to give us. And that transformation begins with a simple candle lit at 11:11 p.m.